Yes, the way it's written, that's correct.
Thank you. So,
No, you're finished now. Another question, Councillor Belford. It's finished. Any other questions for Mr. Webster?
Mr. Webster, do you think that's appropriate for me to satisfy my fiduciary duties through this process?
I can't answer that.
Mr. Chairman,
Councillor Dick.
I've got a question arising from this discussion. Should we not trust advice from HBRC to this council?
Directed at? Who are you directing that at?
Well, that's my question. That's the way that is the tenor of the discussion.
Absolutely, it is.
And I find it inappropriate, and I find that we are crossing the line from governance into management.
Well, we are. Okay. Let's keep the comments to a minimum here. Any questions, particularly for Mr. Webster?
Would I come back to clause 2, Mr. Chairman, and ask, does that not clarify the position of the recommendations?
Recommendation 2. No, order. We're not paying a lawyer to hear from you, Councillor Barker, I can tell you right now.
That we have agreed that we still
Absolutely.
have the final case to come back to us?
Yes.
Does that not answer
Cover the issues, absolutely.
Where we are?
Doesn't. No, it doesn't.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask our lawyer, not one of our councillors?
Most certainly.
Sorry, Councillor, can I just clarify which particular paragraph?
Around and the recommendations, we refer back to the notice that we've
page
had
15.
The Deloitte peer review
Yes.
on page 15, but there's a final peer review still to come back to council, a final analysis when all those moving parts are in place to come back to council.
Yes, I see the words water user uptake as one of the aspects that's to be dealt with by Deloitte, so I imagine that is an opportunity, yes.
No further questions for Mr. Webster. Time well spent. Money well spent. Thank you, sir.
It's good to have that on the record, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, actually, a bit foolhardy, perhaps.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next part of the agenda item concerns was the next requirement, really, that Council had advised HBRC that it would have to receive and be satisfied with its advice from the business case assessment undertaken by Deloitte. The business case was presented to Council in March of this year, and Mr. Drury will actually cover that off in some more detail a bit later on. But just in terms of the process that we're in here at the moment, that business case was then referred to Deloitte's. They presented an interim report and then a final report on that business case. They directed their work at addressing the points that are up there on the slide, really, about whether or not the Regional Council can have comfort that its exposure to cause on capital can be limited to the current funding envelope, which is that provided in the long-term plan of up to $80 million. Whether Council should have a level of comfort on projected returns, and then finally how the... What?
There's a sign behind you.
Yeah.
Which you can't read. Someone going to tell them to take it down, you can't read it.
Okay.
Continue.
Right.
It's not someone to answer.
That's all right. Just...
What were you saying?
And what was I saying? And how investment returns could vary under different uptake scenarios. So Look, Deloitte have completed their review of that, which you're well aware of. You've received that review. It's been incorporated. The findings of that have been incorporated into the statement of proposal that was put out for public consultation. And as I explained, Mr. Drury has a few slides a bit later on the actual detail of that business case. The next requirement that you had is that you'd advised HBRC of around what you required prior to making a decision was around being satisfied with an alternatives investments analysis, and that's a requirement of the Local Government Act, so it has to be met around identifying any alternative investments that meet financial and economic development investment objectives of Council. Nimo Bell similarly presented a report that assessed a range of potential alternative investments for the Regional Council and concluded that the Ruataniwha water storage scheme remained the most economic alternative and a viable investment for the region, considering the importance of the primary industries and the mitigation to the biggest risks to the region's economy, water shortage for agricultural production.
Right, let's continue. Order, please.
Next requirement of Council that's Council stipulated to HBRC around its decision is having received the final decisions of the Board of Inquiry processes on Plan Change 6 and on the Ruataniwha water storage resource consents. The Ruataniwha water storage scheme itself is effectively consented. A final decision from the Board of Inquiry is expected by Saturday. And the comment really around timing of this is that any final decision, there may be further uncertainty around that because of potentially High Court appeals, particularly around the final outcome of Plan Change 6 and its impact upon the Ruataniwha water storage scheme.
No questions, thank you. Oh, question, Councillor Balfour.
My understanding is that HBRC committed to coming back to us with a formal recommendation after the final Board of Inquiry decision. So obviously we don't have that yet. Of course, we could have been having this meeting a week from today. So is that to confirm that we cannot take any further action on this until we receive a recommendation from HBRC on this matter?
Council, so Council can't take any further action on what? Right, okay. So this is one of the conditions precedent, obviously. The scheme itself is consented, well, at least a draft decision has it as consented. So that part of it has been met. The only other requirement is that there are workable resource consents for the scheme to be able to operate within the broader catchment, and that'll be determined by Plan Change 6. So what I'm saying is that while a decision is due out sometime in the next 72 hours on that, it may be months before the final version is known if there are other legal challenges from any number of parties along the way. So your investment decision is protected by the need for there to be workable resource consents, and it doesn't appear to be any reason why that should be delayed by a week, because that's certainly not going to necessarily be the final outcome of the process.
To that, if that decision were deemed by HBRC to be unfavourable, would it be true there are two options? One, they could simply come back and tell us that and indicate to us that the project is not a goer, or at the very least they would come back presumably and say we need to rerun the Deloitte analysis of take-up, et cetera, to redetermine whether the projected take-ups were sufficient to guarantee the financial returns we wish to see.
Look, I can't presume what HBRC will come back to Council with, because obviously a lot will depend on the final decision that is released. But all I can say is that HBRC will come back to Council. and I think that that's probably your main concern, they will come back one way or another, but I can't presume what they might be recommending and or advising council.
Thank you. Councillor Graham.
Mr Chair, with your position, you stated that we reviewed the business case in March, which is true, and then you said that Deloitte's reviewed the business case subsequent to that. But in fact, didn't they review a business plan? Because surely they would have had detailed financials, which we have never had. So we had a business case, they had a business plan with detailed financials, which we have never seen. Is that right?
No, they reviewed the business case that was presented by HBRC to council at the end of March. They worked with HBRC's advisors to understand the financial modelling and some of the assumptions behind that, but they didn't review a business plan that you have never seen, so no, that's not correct.
Councillor Scott.
Mr Chairman, maybe my record is wrong. Did we have a workshop earlier where Deloitte went through some of those underlying figures and how they arrived at their confidence in the modelling?
My understanding was that the workshop was with the BNZ, not Deloitte.
Oh, sorry, with the BNZ, but they did go through those figures with us and how they arrived at those.
Yes.
Thank you.
Question?
Councillor Bowe.
With the figures that we saw, wasn't one of the underlying assumptions that the Plan Change 6 was going to be based on the recommendation of HBRC, i.e. with elevated levels of nitrogen allowable in the waterways, and this was therefore had assumptions about farmer uptake, and subsequent to that we've had the interim Board of Inquiry decision which has much restricted rates of nitrogen, and this has had an effect on what people perceive to be the farmer uptake. So surely the business case that we have been shown is quite out of date and doesn't take into account the Board of Inquiry decision. So how can we rely on it?
The business case was undertaken, or the peer review, I should say, of the business case certainly was presented with those particular factors in mind, and the Deloitte peer review acknowledges that circumstances may change. We still don't know the final decision from the Board of Inquiry, so we haven't asked Deloitte to undertake any analysis of the draft decision, but they will be required to assess any final business case and due diligence process that HBRC completes prior to decision. So your concerns will be addressed by the conditions precedent around that have been being proposed to be put in place.
What does that mean?
Put my hand up for a question.
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 Please.
Thank you. On recommendation 29, the second part of the first sentence says, HBRC has subsequently presented its business case to HBRC with a recommendation that HBRC invests in the RWSS. Where was that expressed?
In the business case on the 26th of March. Sorry. Oh, further back. When the business case was presented to council in March.
Prior to the Board of Inquiry decision.
Yeah, the Board of Inquiry decision was in April.
And prior to the Board of Inquiry decision, which was labelled, I think, moderately by the Chair in his style as turn the lights out in Central Hawke's Bay, and the Chair of HBRC referred to the Board of Inquiry's decision.
Your point?
But just my point is that there's been a significant shift.
So there's okay. Well, we understand that. Do you have a further question?
Well, how is it that has HBRC reviewed its recommendation in the light of those events?
HBRC will review its recommendation in light of a final decision. It hasn't not done it in light of a draft decision.
Okay.
Okay, further. How many more slides do you have there?
Sorry, just just a quick, obviously one of the requirements that Council had indicated back in October 2012 was to undertake a special consultative process, and that was undertaken throughout May. 17 public meetings were held and nearly 500 people attended, so we had a really good response to that. Just under 200 written submissions were received, and a number of submitters took the opportunity to verbally present to you here early last week. A range of questions arose from some of the points that were made by submitters at the meeting last week, and the answers to all of those questions are included in your papers as attachments 3 to 11. So this is really just this slide here is an opportunity for you to ask any questions of any one of us about that material that's been attached.
Thank you. Councillor Bevan.
Thank you, Chair. So the public consultation process, Liz, was underpinned by a document called the Statement of Proposal, which set out the proposal to the public about the investment in the RWSS, how much money we were proposing to invest, and the conditions around which we would make that investment. Is that correct? Okay. So I want to read to you from that Statement of Proposal, and this is page 13, number 5. Will it go ahead? In addition to being satisfied with other information, including legal reviews of RWSS documents, an independent peer review of the business case, and advice on alternative investments, the following conditions precedent need to be satisfied before the HBRC provides any funding to HBRC. And then it goes on and it lists those 4 conditions precedent. And then it says, in the event these conditions are not met to the satisfaction of HBRC by financial close, which is expected by 30th of September 2014, no investment will be made in RWSS in this form at this time. Now I want to repeat those words because they're really important. In the event these conditions are not met to the satisfaction of HBRC by financial close. Now we've just had advice from Stuart Webster that the motion in front of us that we're going to be asked to vote on turns that decision making over to HBRC. Now that's completely contrary to what we have made an undertaking to the public about. And I've got a real problem with that, and I want you to tell me how we can resolve it.